Okay. You done? You ready? You perked? Okay, you're just sitting there. I work on these things and then I sit back and go, oh, Lord, there's just too much there. So I'm not sure if we're going to go through all of this or not, but we're just going to start walking it through. You good with this? Okay. So out of the fog into the fight, the praxis of Purim. Do you know what praxis is? Praxis is when you come into the practical applications of something. Okay, you have that thing there, but then you have to kind of, I guess the best way to ask it is, so what? What do you do now? Okay, and this is what is so often lacking in a lot of things you do remembrance of. Now, it's fine to do remembering somebody's birthday. There's not really a praxis after that. But when you do something that God says to remember, to celebrate, there's always got to be a kind of so what. It's not just that it happened. Hello? Okay? It's that what does it show us and how is that speaking now into my life? And there's a lot of things in scriptures that are not connected with time. When was the last time you celebrated David and Goliath? It's not anchored anywhere. It's not that you can't. It's just God doesn't do that, okay? But he does with what we're walking in tonight, and that's Purim, okay? Because we're in the month, and actually on Saturday evening is Purim Eve that rolls into the day of Purim. So we're going to kind of connect on that. And this, you know this word, right? All scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching. What? Come on. Oh, come on. Go look it up. Okay. But you know that all scripture, when it was written, it was referring into the Old Testament because the New Testament didn't exist yet. Oh, what do you know? And then Paul, make sure we're clear on it, said, now all these things happened to them. That was the Jews that were out there as examples, and they were written for our admonition. That's a word most people don't like. That means correction and warning. Okay? Upon whom the ends of the ages have come. You think that last part is fairly true? Yeah, okay. So we look at that with a question about Esther and Purim. And so traditionally when you're celebrating Purim, you actually read through the narrative. How many of you read through it recently? Okay, if not, like this morning, I've read through it I just put it on my Bible app, right, and had it read it to me. Just let it soak, okay? It's an amazing story, and you're supposed to let it perk. But traditionally you would read the story, and every time that you would say Mordecai, everybody would go, yay! And when you say Esther, they go, ooh. Say Haman, they go, ah, or make noise, right? We're not going to do that. But instead, I thought we need to just give a synopsis. You all know this Esther, right? Okay. So then, pardon, I'll just do a little bit here. They all party hardy, but the queen won't be seen. The king's in a rage, so she's off the stage. Then beauties are elected, but Esther's selected. Morty's on watch, so a guard's plot is botched. Haman's star rises, but Morty despises. The cast lots set the date to pour out Hay's hate. The king is persuaded, his edict translated. Morty's a mess, but Esther is clueless. Till he sends the word, it's all up to her. For 3 days they fast, then she stands in the gasp. The king leans her way, but she defers and delays. But he fails to sleep, so Mordecai's veeped. You know that word, right? Veeped? Okay. Then revealed at the dinner is that Haman's the sinner. He's hung with a noose, and a new decree's loosed. When that day does arrive, it's the Jews that survive. Then they party to honor him, forever called Purim. Okay, well, so. Right? That's the whole story there. So out of that, right, there's a whole lot there. What? Oh, you want that me go back? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just me messing around trying to. Yeah. I'm a poet, but I don't know it, but my feet show it because they're Longfellows, right? Actually, they're not. They're short and wide. They're kind of like, I have flippers. Okay. So the question is, out of that, what are some things that are for our instruction, for our correction, for our admonition? What are the praxis points? First is perspective in the long game. Second is God had them do what? Third, God being God's bait. That's one everybody loves. His timing is everything. A time to be hidden, a time to be revealed. Break through the fog and spiritual disorientation. Empowered to be engaged in confidence. That is like far too much for you to possibly absorb tonight, right? So we're just going to skip to the end. No. Let me just walk through some stuff, and you can tell when you start getting too much, just fall out of your seat. I'll get the clue. Okay. The question always, when you're in a situation, when you're in the book of Esther, if you were living in the book of Esther, the question is always about your perspective. How close, how dialed in you get, or how much you pull back and get a bigger perspective. Now, some of you I just saw that. Some of you just go, okay, I can't even look at that, right? Perspective. But you have to be able to get outside of your own little story, because too often we see our lives like this, with limited vision and down in the weeds. But if you read Esther, you'll see that whatever they experienced at the time, ultimately you got to see this, right? You have to see the whole board. Say, see the whole board. See the whole board. Because this is what's at stake, folks. You might be right down here, but you please need to get an understanding. This is what's going on. You do matter. Hello. Say, I am important to this. Okay. Copy? Okay. Secondly, see the whole board. Secondly, you've got to make sure we're clear that God works on the long game. Okay? We are such an instant culture now. We want everything so fast. And God's just like, yeah, no. But God, I prayed about it yesterday. Yeah. And? Hello? So let me give you the context for Esther, because you don't, unless you take the time to pull these out, you won't realize it, because you can sit and read Esther in about 30 minutes. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his officials and servants. That's Esther 1. That's when things are rolling. But in Esther 2, so Esther was taken to King Xerxes in the 7th year of his reign. So we've advanced how many years? In the 1st month of the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, or the lots. And so what you're seeing is the 3rd and the 7th and the 12th year. So God is taking 9+ years just to set up that story that you read through in half an hour. And then he takes another 12 months to wrap the whole thing up. How many of you are good with waiting 10 years for God to do something? How about 10 months? 10 weeks? 10 days? Okay, come on, right? Just. Come on, I have faith, God, it should happen now. Okay? One of the things from Esther is take the long view, folks. Mike's thing about, you're in the line somewhere. Okay. By the way, when you're in the line, don't be yelling out, hey, would you hurry up there? Some of you jump lines, but you don't want to jump that one, right? Okay, do you get this? The bigger perspective with Esther, because the only way you can see is how stunning it is how God moves the pieces around. Okay? The story takes place when you've got the king and you've got Vashti and that whole thing, and that blow up and she gets kicked out. But it goes back further, because even though it's not referenced until the 2nd chapter, it's much earlier when Esther, Hadassah, is born and her parents die, and she's adopted in. So God is just moving these pieces around. The backstory is there. Can everybody take a deep breath? The 4th fruit of the Spirit is what? Patience. Other translations called long suffering. I think that's an amazing way of saying it. Okay? We don't long suffer very well. Part of the issue is then we drop into the Abraham-Sarah dilemma. Well, God, you're waiting so long, so obviously you're not going to do it that way, so maybe I need to do this. Hello? Okay. So you got that so far? Perspective, the long game. Next thing is that God would never do that, right? We've talked about this a little bit. I just, somehow they skipped over it when I was a kid in Sunday school. They didn't make a big point of this. But Esther is sex trafficked into a pagan palace. Just plain and simple. Then she's groomed to service the king. And in fact, this nice little Jewish girl does such an amazing job. She does the role so well that he promotes her into queen. By the way, you realize they even have two houses. They make it very clear. You come from this house, and once you spent the night with the king, then you go into this house. So you got the new and the used. You might, come on. You have to... The reason that's so important is because God does this all the time. He uses a harlot of Jericho, right? Rahab. He does the Judah Tamra thing. That's a father-in-law, daughter-in-law, okay, to extend the family line. You know, can we please stop being shocked by how God does things? But God would never do, okay, he will not go outside or contradict what he's put in here. But if you read the whole thing honestly here, okay, all bets are off as far as we're concerned, right? He just constantly loves to upset our respectability scale. You got to be slow to presume. I remember years ago when we lived in Washington, D.C., for some reason there was a group of us, 4 of us, that would get together. We called it ourselves Seminarians Anonymous. It's just, we were all seminary grads, but none of us were doing ministry except one guy. And we'd sit there and have these really interesting discussions. And one time we were talking about Tim Keller, who had a church up in New York City, and a guy came to the Lord, came to faith through that, who was an executive vice president for MTV. And so we had this discussion because it was apparently something that Tim had kind of floated out there in the church. Well, should he resign? And one guy who was in ministry said, "Oh, absolutely. That place is just decrepit and stuff." And the other 3 of us go, "I'm not sure. Who else is going to be salt and light in that place?" You know, we have to get he did what? God, you're asking me to do what? You want me to go where? Okay, take the limits off, folks. If there's anything about in Esther's, you've got to take the limits off. He's got his own ways, right? Takes 3 little good Hebrew boys, 4 of them, right? Puts them into Babylon. One of them becomes Daniel, right? Becomes the leader of all the magicians and astrologers. What? Read your Bible as it was meant to be read honestly and not with some veil of niceness and the way you think it should be, because that's what I love. One of the things I so love about Jesus is they just couldn't figure him out. Even his own disciples. It's just constantly, he's like, what he's doing? He's talking with a woman. He's touching a leper. He's, okay. Yes, I love that about him. Because love has that kind of thing to it. You good with that? Okay, so we got perspective. We got God would never do that. Get past that. Then this thing. God's strange sense of doing bait and switch. All the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. They told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's word would stand, for Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Having yet learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. And God was shocked. How did that happen? Doggone it, I missed it. Are you getting this, folks? Hello. We're entering an age where to be a true follower of Jesus, you will be increasingly maligned and sidelined and potentially targeted. If you're going to speak truth to power, if you're going to hold on to what's real and not blend in with the artificial, you're going to be a thorn in the flesh. Okay? Just what's really interesting is when that kind of stuff happens, guess what happens to the church? It thrives. Now, I'd rather not thrive that way personally, but you know what? It's silly to not do that. But when I look at this, and when you look at, we're in this month that's connected to Naphtali, and the key character of that, as far as who's known of that, is Barak, okay, and Deborah. And he is basically used as bait to lure out the enemy, because God has this thing going, I'm going to smoke it out, and then I'm going to take his head off. Do you get this? God just wasn't shocked at the edict that went out. He says, it's okay. I got it. I got this working. So all I'm trying to say, folks, if you're in that position or you feel like you're being bait for the enemy, you have enough prayer coverage, but calm down. You don't know that God isn't setting you up in order to draw up things for the enemy so he can deal with the enemy. You know what the best time is to deal with some sort of demonic influence in somebody? When it manifests. That's the time, because there it is. Okay? Hello? You try digging around and everything for a thing. It's good. Okay? But when it gets riled up, because it's been drawn up, because something's going on, that's the time you can deal with it. Okay? Hello? I'll stop there. But just, here's my phrase. But God would never do that today. Okay. Copy? I know it's a little bit weird. You probably haven't heard many sermons on that. How to be good bait. Let me tell you, most of us aren't, because we're not willing to do what Mordecai did and refused to bow down. That was a pretty big deal. He was not only risking that with Haman, but he was also going against the king's edict. Oh, okay. Esther is so much about his timing and everything. If you read through and you watch all the different times for things to happen, let me just give you a rundown. There's a time to be hidden, as Esther was. There's a time to cross into the unknown, which she had to do going into the king's harem. A time to gain counsel. She took counsel from those that were in that pagan court, the eunuchs, to know what to do. There's a time to listen carefully. There's a time to report back. When when Mordecai was listening at the gate and he overheard the guards who were going to kill the king, and he reports it. There's a time to rebuke. He has to do that with her, to wake her up. There's a time to fast. There's a time to approach even a dangerous situation. There's a time to just wait. There's a time to speak and to risk being revealed. A time to prepare for war. A time to go to war. Sometimes these two we miss out on as the body. There's a time to celebrate and a time to reverse the curse. And each one of these things had to take place in its given time, folks. Staying in time. So he hides Esther in place and he waits. He sets Mordecai as bait and he waits. He allows Haman to be in power and he waits. You get this? Again, it's part of the long game, but the long game is the fact that different things for different times. Stay in time. Say, I'm going to stay in time. One of the biggest challenges is we don't do that. One of the things I really learned from Kim over the years was she would get a word and she'll sit on it until God says no. I get a word and I want to tell everybody about it. Right? She would sit. Some of you know that. She got a word for some of you, and maybe some of it was like 4 or 5 years, I think in one case, before it was time. She just flipped through her notebooks and goes, okay, on March 14th, back in 2014, boom. Because she's willing to wait when God says no. So far, so good? Timing, right? You getting these? Okay, good. Hidden or revealed? Big question. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. Interesting, right? There's times, and you have to check with God, what are you doing now? Jesus, to me, this fits right into it. When he sends out the disciples, when he sends out the 70 actually in Matthew 10, he says, I'm sending you out. You're very much like sheep among wolves, so be as shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. I love this combination. It's just like, what? That word shrewd is to be wise or cunning. Okay? You don't just blurt it out. A snake is cunning. Say, I'm a snake? No, but you're supposed to be as wise as a snake. You know what? Jesus didn't have a problem. He said, as a serpent was raised up in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be raised up. Okay? He understood. Okay? He's not got the heebie-jeebies over that. Okay? We equate a few too many things. But the cunningness of that, knowing when to be hidden, knowing when to strike. And then that second word is about being unmixed. It's like unmixed wines or metal is pure. It's got integrity without mixed motives. So you need to be cunning and you need to be pure. Does that make sense? Because you at times might want to blurt something out. You want to reveal something. And sometimes you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them. You got to know when to walk away. And you got to know when to run. It's biblical. Truth comes in many forms, people, let me tell you. Yeah. So here's the question you have for yourself. What is it about you, what is in you, what is because of you that's waiting to be revealed? Do you think everything that about you has been revealed yet? Not even close. Okay. Pardon me? You better hurry up. Okay, so the question about timing and about who gets revealed. It's interesting to me that Mordecai basically told him he was a Jew. He made a point of it. But with Esther, no. Okay? It's not just one size fits all, folks. For A, it isn't always B. For C, it isn't always D. For A, sometimes it's Z squared minus Y times X cubed. What? Okay, yeah. Okay, now about this one. I said you got to break through the fog. What about fog? How many of you walk through really thick fog? Okay. We talked with some of this with the guys, and I was talking with the men in prison about it. When I lived in England for a year, we were going into a pub, and there was a heavy fog. And I said, man, this is intense fog. The guy said, this ain't fog, mate. What is it? It's a mist. Well, then what's a fog? Oh, it's easy. A mist is when you can't see the front of the car in front of you, and a fog's when you can't see the front of your car. I went, okay. I think he was right. It is really that pretty. So there is something about being in an intense, deep fog, right? It brings up kind of fear and some foreboding. It's kind of damp and cold. But the weird thing, how many of you walked in, really thick fog? Could you hear much in that time? It's interesting, it dampens the sound as well. Just gives you kind of a strange sense of it. Okay. Well, that's one thing when you're walking on ground. It's another thing when you're flying a plane. Because when you're walking on the ground, at least your feet are on the ground, right? You can feel your feet there. When you're not and you're in this situation, it's a whole other matter. And, we refer to you again, because of the model God gave us, that you are like that fighter. Okay, taking off, being sent back. The challenge is when you're flying into something that looks like this, okay? And this is really, really dangerous stuff, even with modern aircraft. Here's one example of the danger. Major Gregory DeYoung flew his fighter into the Pacific Ocean at full throttle. $32 million aircraft was destroyed. He was killed. He made no distress call, no attempt to eject, and no apparent aircraft malfunction. As far as he was concerned, he was doing just fine. He was 34 years old. He had 2,300 hours of flight time, more than 750 hours in a fighter, an F-15. He was not a newbie, okay? The report came out and said the pilot experienced unrecognized spatial disorientation, which caused him to misperceive his attitude, altitude, and airspeed. Attitude is right how you're doing on this. Altitude, but attitude is how you're going like this or that. He was clearly unaware of his position and impacted the water. This is called spatial disorientation, and it's a huge issue. How many of you know about the Kobe Bryant helicopter issue? Same thing. Guy was in bad weather, into fog, disoriented, powered right down into the ground. John F. Kennedy Jr., plane crash out in the ocean, and many of you remember that? Same thing. Got disoriented out in there because he was flying at night. You got to be watching your instruments. Spatial disorientation is the inability to determine your position or relative motion. It commonly occurs during periods of challenging visibility, since vision is the dominant sense for orientation. Without a visual reference or cues such as a visible horizon, humans will rely on non-visual senses to establish their sense of motion and equilibrium. What that means is this. How do you know that you're sitting still right now? Sorry, what? Your back hurts. Okay. Your eyes are open. Okay. You can feel your chair. Right. There's pressure, right, on your butt and on your back where you're sitting there. Okay. Your ears are telling you that you're not in motion because they've got the semicircular canals, right? They'll work like gyroscopes. Now, if you started doing this back and forth for a while, okay, and stopped, you would still kind of feel like you're moving. Okay, because those are picking up signals and they're trying to communicate with your brain. If your eyes were closed and you started doing that, it would change a whole lot of things. When you're flying, all that stuff gets put into motion and you do not know sometimes where you are. Instinct is worse than useless in clouds. It can induce deadly spirals. Pilots must learn against all contradictory sensations the difficult discipline of an absolute belief in their instruments. So, this is my good friend Jeff Landreth, his wife Gay. We're on the phone each week. They have a brokerage down in Florida. Good friends, have known each other for 17 years. He flew F-15s, is a Air Force Academy grad, and flew no-fly zones over an operation in the Gulf, logged a lot of hours. And so I thought, it'd be interesting to talk with him about this spatial disorientation. So let me just tell you let me jump to it. What happens is that when you're out and you can't see, you're in what Jeff calls the milk bowl. The milk bowl means all your visual orientation now has just gone white out, okay? Or at night over water. You have no point of reference for the horizon. So your eyes at that point don't function, okay? But you can feel your seat, right, and the pressure on it, and your ears in their work. The problem is when you start to bank your plane, okay, you can feel in your ears that you're making that, okay? But as you continue to bank, guess what happens? They adapt, because now they're going like, okay, well, now we're fine. And so as far as your ears start to tell your body, and your butt is adjusted to it, and your legs and the pressure on it, as far as all of those are communicating to you, you're level now. The only way you know you're not is on this indicator on that, and it's looking like this. Otherwise, and the challenge, Jeff says then, is when that happens, you have to fight to take over to get back to level your plane again. Because as far as the rest of your body's concerned, you're flying level and that thing is broken. Are you tracking? There's 3 kinds of spatial disorientation. The first kind is recognized like that, when you something and you feel like you're level, but you look and you see the gauge is saying this. So you recognize it. Okay, now I got to try to do something about it. The second type is unrecognized. You're just flying around. You don't know that you're not level until suddenly you pile right into the ocean. Okay? That first example I gave you was unrecognized. Okay? It was the same with the pilot, Kobe Bryant's helicopter pilot. By the way, that guy had 8,500 hours of flight time. And he'd flown that same area for 10 years. He was their lead pilot. He was very experienced, but he got disoriented. Okay? There's a third kind called incapacitating. And this is when you know there's kind of something wrong, but literally you can't do anything to change it. You get so befuddled in with even the fact that this is showing you're doing like this, and the altimeter is spinning down. So part of you knows, but the other part of you is like, but I'm fine, and I can't pull that out because if I do that, I'll ditch the plane. So you have this conflict going on inside you. Is this making some sense? Okay. The milk bowl, when you lost the visual clues out there, okay, like I could put, they do this thing where they train them, they put them in this chair, just a simple chair, with their feet up, put ear covers over them and blindfold them, and they'll start to spin them around and have them say, put their thumbs as to which way they're going. Okay, it's not a complicated thing. And as they're going around, they get it right for a while, but then even though they're still spinning, they'll go like this. And then if they stop them, they won't go the other way. They'll just stop them, they'll go, oh, like this. They think they've now shifting and going that way. It's just what happens is your body is trying to process the information, and it can't get it. And so the body senses something, but the eyes are seeing it. The FAA uses this phrase, seeing is not believing. So they look at the gauge, they see that it's like this, but they don't believe it. When they first put these into planes, all the pilots said, you got broken equipment here. Because I was level, but it showed this. Okay. And what that can, this thing is what's amazing. It can be so compelling that fighter pilots will report that they're trying to adjust it, but the plane won't respond. It's like there's an invisible giant hand holding the plane. Now, it has nothing to do with the plane. It's that their body is in conflict, okay? Because what it feels versus what is so compelling. Jeff said when that happens, what he was trained to do, because you can have it happen, he said you literally have to take your main hand that you steer with off the stick. See the stick down there in the bottom there? He said I had to use my left hand because that way your brain can kind of communicate with your left hand. If you got your right normal hand in there, he said it's like you can't fight it. No matter how hard you try to will it to go there, you can't do it. Because your body, your sensory system in your back and butt with the pressure and your inner ears are saying you're fine. You don't need to pull it back. Okay? And what you can end up in then is what they call a death spiral. You start banking down and going around this way. And unless you break through into a clear horizon and can see that, you're gone. And by the way, the FAA will tell you that if you're non-instrument trained, in other words, you're not trained to fly just by the instruments with no visuals at all, if you get lost up in a cloud bank, your lifeline, okay, the length of time that you will live is 187 seconds. When they have pilots, non-instrument rating, get lost in cloud situations, within 3 minutes and 7 seconds are dead. That's how disoriented. Okay? So the reason I wanted to tell you this is because the reality is we are catching a tremendous amount of fog now. Okay? Sensory overload to where you cannot process. Why is it? Well, I've talked about this before, the Buckminster-Fuller knowledge curve. Up to 1900, human knowledge doubled every century. After World War II, it doubled every 25 years. You know how fast it's doubling now? Every 13 months. The totality of human knowledge. In about 2 years, plus or minus, it's going to be doubling every 12 hours. It's a tsunami of information, and it's mainly going to be coming at you through portals like this. That is just overwhelming. There is too much to try to absorb, okay? And then you've got this factor leading to the fog as well, the real versus the fake fact stuff, the artificial. Again, I recommend this book. Real that we're describing is a true way to view life based on God's original intent for us and His Word. The more we pursue Him, the more we align with reality. The more we rebel against Him, the less we reflect reality. You have the majority of cultures fleeing from the real and fleeing into the artificial, which is anything that seeks to replace God's view of reality by opposing Him or making Him irrelevant. This makes sense? But the artificial stuff that is coming at us, folks, now, and your ability to try to discern it is a challenge. Lot going on. So, spiritually, this is what's being in the milk bowl is. We get overwhelmed by information, by the demands. Anybody feel overwhelmed by the demands on your time? Okay. The decisions you have to make, and you know there's increasing pressure to make quick decisions and make right decisions. Oh, do I have enough information? There's always more information. Here's the challenge, right? Not necessarily wisdom, but there's more information. Opinions. So many opinions shouting at you. Okay? Could be from simply something that you want to buy. Let's see, how's it rated? How many stars? Who said that I read? Hello? Yes? And by the way, where are most of the opinions that get debated for you? Where does that happen? They're right up in here. Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. You're not all a little bit schizophrenic? Come on. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should. Maybe, come on. How many of you had this debate inside, these opinions, right? Come on. Okay. We get worn out. We get frustrated, and frankly, we start self-medicating. Self-medicating can be taking more artificial stuff, social media, on and on. So the question about what is true and what is real is more and more of a challenge. And frankly, I believe it leads to, instead of spatial disorientation, spiritual disorientation. And see, here's the challenge, because with spatial, your body wants to go into a certain way that's not aligned with what's real. You get this? But it will, you could take one of those pilots, put them on a polygraph, they would pass with flying colors. Oh no, I was going straight and level. That had to be off, because I know. Spiritually, this is the same challenge we're in, folks. Oh no, I know this is the right thing to do. So you got, hello. There's a lot of spiritual stuff. You see people in a spiritual death spiral. Hello. We've seen people do that. They're sure it's all right. It's just fine. How about this phrase? But I'm just not feeling it. No? The danger of not believing, not trusting the true instrument. Right? Straight and level. If it's looking like this, it doesn't matter how good you feel. I'm sure this is the right way. And you know what? You could swear it on a stack of Bibles. But you're going to have to come back and go, okay, that's there. So I've got to somehow relinquish. The challenge is a lot of times we don't even know it. It's unrecognized spiritual disorientation. Hello? Now, if you're a pilot, you know what saves your bacon out of that? Hopefully you got a wingman who can talk you off it. Or if you got somebody in the next seat as a co-pilot, it's never been heard of that I know of where both people end up having spatial disorientation at the same time. So if the one pilot has got it, then he says, oh, take the stick, okay? Hello? What's stunning is Tim has a personal story with this, with somebody that he grew up with, who had a fight with his parents about his wife who was not Catholic, and she was Methodist or the other way around, whatever. And then went up and got in his plane and went straight up and got spatial disorientation and flew right down into the ground. Because when you're stressed, okay, and you fly, it makes you even more vulnerable to that. Spiritually, is there any parallel here, folks? When you're out there trying to navigate and you're stressed, the spiritual disorientation can get even better. And part of you inside could swear you're doing the right thing. I'm just trying to give you a heads up. I don't want you to be paranoid, but we have got less and less visual references that are out there on a clean horizon line. Spiritually, okay? I'm just telling you. And you're going to have to make sure that you got a wingman or a co-pilot, or if nothing else, the need for ground radar. Okay? If it gets real bad, Jeff talked about this. It gets real bad, you get vectored in with a ground-based radar. They literally call to you and say, okay, bear left, bear right, on glide path. Okay? And they literally talk them down, talk them in the whole way. Some of you are that way. Wait. Turn to the person next to you and say, you may be that way some way. I'm serious. We have to, just like Kim was talking about with Shelley and with dealing with that, we've got to be there for each other to talk each other in. There's times we're just going to be disoriented, okay? There's too much coming down. You are in a revolutionary time. You just we don't grasp how crazy this time is. You might have just a little bit of reference, okay? Everything is changing, and your question about what's real and artificial is going to be in a continued challenge. So you're going to have this. You're going to have that instrument right there. You're going to have to be well-versed in it. You're going to have to spend enough time with God so that you don't just get dependent on how you feel about a situation. And I will tell you, for people that are prophetic, led by the Spirit, it's an added danger. Okay? Hello? So, you tracking with this? So, what I want to just tell you is that I think that both Mordecai and Esther had a little challenge with fog. You're like, well, wait a minute, how did that work? Well, for Mordecai, when the edict goes out, guess what he does? He goes into mourning, right? Sackcloth and ashes and goes around. Okay, well, that just seems like a normal response. What's very interesting, though, is he doesn't communicate it all to Esther. Now, he could communicate fine with her because, right, he heard about the plot with the king, about with the guards who want to kill the king. So he got word to Esther. So he had that capability. But what you find out when you read the story is he never reached out to her. There's times, folks, when we get bad news or when we're afraid, we just get disoriented. We're not sure who to connect to. You tracking? And then what about Esther? Well, I think Esther just had this tremendous isolation because guess what? When she hears finally about Mordecai, she sends clothes out. He refuses. And she's like, what's the deal? Her fog is that she's just in complete isolation. She doesn't even know. Hello? She has no clue there's a threat. So he's got to get word back, send a copy of the edict and everything else. And then it's obvious because she pushes back with two things. One, presumed powerlessness to change anything. How many of you feel powerless to change certain things? Okay. Guess what, though? That can create part of the fog because that's not always true. In fact, if you are a praying person, I could say that's almost never true. The most important work that I do all week is in the mornings. I reconnect with Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and I get cleaned up, and then I get into my seat in the heavenlies, and I war for you by name. Because I understand that from that position, I have the opportunity to make an impact on your life through that. And I thoroughly believe it. Even today, I've got this thing coming up. I'm not sure where it's all going to go. Okay, got a ping went out. That's great. Now I got to follow it, But when I'm done, I have to anchor first in Him. I got to clear the fog. I got to get reconnected. I got to understand who I am. I'm back there and I'm looking at what's level, regardless of how I feel. And I get in that seat and I war from there. And then it's funny because I was talking to him about it this morning. I said, well, I'm not sure what's going to go on tonight, but I got what I needed to get done this morning. Because I know where it really comes, okay? So she's presuming, because Mordecai has to threaten her, do not think that you're going to be safe, okay? The fog that's around her is this illusion that, if I don't create an issue, at least I'm going to be safe. Hello? Bulk of the church of believers. Well, if I don't really say anything, I'm going to be fine. If I don't really step up, the enemy's not going to try to target me. Oh, he hates your guts anyway. You might as well shoot first instead of being shot at. So the presumed threat, presumed insulation, and presumed powerlessness. Because guess what? She wasn't powerless, folks. She had to risk, correct? She had to break through that fog of, oh, no, I can't do that. Oh no, that's not done. Oh no, I won't be harmed if I just stay here and keep a low profile. Do you understand how that works? And it's instead of spatial disorientation, it's spiritual. And it feels real comfortable in this. We don't know that we're in a death spiral. That's what Mordecai has to do. Mordecai at that point has to be your wingman and say, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't do this, God's going to raise up deliverance somewhere else, but you and all your household's going to go into the ocean. Okay. You see how that works? Am I getting too much? You got it? Okay. We're winding up here, Christy. Whatever. Never mind. Next point. You're empowered, folks. Say, I'm empowered. I'm empowered. Okay, but you're empowered to be engaged. And this is something that the church just kind of misses. The king's edict granted the Jews, this is the other edict, right, that Mordecai puts together, in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them, and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. Okay, that will be this Sunday. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Here's the key, right there, so that they would be ready. You know, we're empowered to be engaged. Let me read you another translation of this. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. But on this day, none of the Jews would come together. They refused to assemble or attack the enemies who were determined to destroy them, even though the edict of the king authorized them to fight. Many had jobs that delayed them, or weddings, sports, and birthday parties that required their absence. So they hid as best they could, but were slowly hunted down and destroyed. Those that remained merged seamlessly into the culture so that no one could tell who they were or if they were any different. That's from the book of Esther, chapter 9, the New Dying Version. Are you getting right? Because frankly, this would be a good part of the church. The question is, are we prepared? There were two edicts, right? The one of Haman, which said they're all going to be killed, and the one that was under Mordecai, which said not that they weren't going to be killed, but that they could fight back. So the question is, are we ready to do that? Are we confident? Is the body confident? They were confident for this reason. See how many of these you think apply to us. They had royal authorization to go to battle. They had an advocate in Mordecai with power that influenced all the people in all places, right? Many, it says, if you read it, many joined the Jews once that second edict came out. They became Jews. They're like, okay, I can see where that's going. Writing's on the wall. They were convinced that they would win. They organized to gather and fight, and they aligned in time with the royal decree. What about us? We have to be confident as they were, first of all, because we're not solo. One, we know that we're not alone. He is on the battlefield. Angels are with us, and we're together in the fight. True or not? True, true, and true. Number two, we have confidence in the ultimate victory. True or not? Okay. Our perspective from heaven sees the big picture and the long game. Our perspective is from the end of all things. Our hope, reward, and comfort are where? In this, in Him. Where's it coming from? Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. My hope and confidence. Okay? The restoration of all things. Confidence in our weapons. We must know what they are, we must know how to use them, and we must have confidence that they do indeed work. How many weapons have you got? How many weapons are you good with using? How about these? How about the blood of the Lamb? How effectively do you know how to deploy it? They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, the word of the testimony, and they did not love their lives unto death. It's a threefold cord. You have to go in there with a willingness to die. Our testimony, our perspective is a huge weapon, okay? I know the long game, which means I can't be twisted to default to something the enemy wants. When Satan comes against Jesus, he wants him to short circuit the stuff. He wants him to rule without the cross. He wants him to do something impressive to convince the people rather than let the Father draw all men to himself. On and on and on. It's always a shortcut, right? Our perspectives helps us with that. Our true identity in him, our position in the heavens, the fact that we can pray, that we make declarations, we have the word, we have all the gifts. Say all. All the gifts. Say, I have all the gifts. Because the Holy Spirit is present in you in the same quantity and quality as he is in Yeshua right now. Prophecy, tongues, boldness, on and on. Praise and worship. You have all the fruits, which, by the way, is a huge weapon. You don't know that. You think that love is not a weapon? Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Joy. Peace, joy, laughter, all of these are weapons. Number 4, other thing we go into is we understand we're already dead. Say, I'm already dead. Through Jesus' death on the cross, the world is dead to me and I'm dead to the world. You know, folks, this is an important thing. One of my affirmations in the morning, in my prayer, you know, that I am crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives in me. And by the cross, Father, I am dead to the world, to its demands, its delusions, its distractions, its temptations and timelines. And all those things are dead to me. Just make a declaration of that, folks. Thank God that's a fact. And it will become more and more a fact. And then we are dead to sin, but we're alive to God. I love this line from, it's actually a true line that Ronald Spears spoke, but it's quoted in Band of Brothers. The only hope you have is to accept the fact that you're already dead. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll be able to function as a soldier is supposed to function. So we have to stop trying to preserve our reputations, protect our turfs, project our legacy, position our earthly agenda, and we have to release our safe exit mindset strategies. I know I've saturated you. You can watch the replay or not. Praxis points. Check your perspective on the long game, okay? Places you're frustrated. Why hasn't this happened yet, God? Well, give it a beat, folks. Give it a beat. That Esther, just the text of Esther takes at least 10 years for that to transpire, let alone the years before, okay? God had them do what? Do not be shocked. Whatever he asks you, okay? Being God's bait. Some of us in here, that's going to happen. Some of it's already happened. You didn't realize it at the time. You just thought you were being beat up, but you didn't know that the Lord was actually using you to expose other issues. I've been used that way to expose issues in organizations several times. Didn't always work out well for me. But God came and dealt with it on the other side, okay? Sometimes it did. Sometimes it worked fine. But other times, no. Okay? His timing is everything. And there's a time for just so many ways. And you know what? You got to just stay in that. There's a time to be hidden, time to be revealed. What's next for you? Just go home even tonight and say, okay, God, what do you want to reveal next here? And where and how? There's so much glory in you that hasn't come out yet. You know, I know that because I can stand here and look at you guys. And if the fullness of that glory was here, I'd be delighted, but I'd be speechless. We have to break the fog and the spiritual disorientation. This is a huge heads up, folks. I just feel the Spirit's all over this. That thing about spatial disorientation and the fact, again, talking to Jeff, you literally have to change hands because as much as you're trying to tell your hand, that's what's truth, and this that you're feeling is not, you can't do it. You literally have to let go and bring your weak hand in to get it to work. That's how compelling it is. We've all been schnookered that way. And you're empowered to be engaged, not to just sit back. You're in this fight for a purpose. If you're part of this fellowship, it's because you've been other places where they just weren't training you, teaching you to stand up and fight. Because it's just kind of like, well, we'll just try to take care of each other and stay in our foxholes. Hell no. The gates of hell will not prevail against the ecclesia, but that means the ecclesia has to go to the gates of hell. And then be confident because he is with us. We have the weapons. We're already dead. Do you know that people who know sometimes that they have only a short time to live or a certain period of time, do you know that they can be some of the most free people ever? Because they're stopping worrying about that. They know they got their place in the line. It's coming up soon, so they're going to have to make the best of it. So don't be overwhelmed, though, by the scope and the scale of all this stuff. Be aware of it because we have to discern what's real and what's artificial. But the question is back to one that Kim learned years ago, the Lord gave her. What does obedience look like today, Lord? So we come out of the fog and into the fight. The Praxis of Purim. Copy that? There's a lot there. Take whatever you can. But please, particularly, understand what's going on now within our culture with these things to create that fog. And we have to become good at not trusting our feelings too much, folks. If we got to, okay, no, I got to, Something's going to give, and you don't want to get caught in a death spiral. But we have to be able to speak into each other. Who is your Mordecai who can call you out? Have you got a Mordecai who will do that? You're part of a fellowship where that can happen? Do you know people well enough? Do they know you well enough that they can do that? Because if not, then you're in huge danger. Isolation is strategy really number one for the enemy. Divide and conquer. If he can divide you into one, then so much the better. Father, I love your word. And I love how your Spirit's moving. And Father, I feel so aware of how relevant the book of Esther is right now. Lord, help us to see, to recognize when we're in that disorientation. We might feel like it's fine, but we're not flying straight and level. Lord, give us the courage to ask for help and the courage to speak. And Lord, help us get fully prepared for the fight and fully engaged in it because you've won the battle. We're fighting a battle you've already won, Lord. We don't always understand what you're doing, but we know what you've done. And no matter what comes our way, we will overcome. In the name of Jesus. Amen.